They're mine. The words escaped Adrian Montclair's lips like a prayer and a curse combined. His $3,000 Italian suit suddenly felt like it was suffocating him as he stared across the crowded Milan gallery at two 4-year-old children who had his eyes, those distinctive storm gray eyes that stared back at him from every mirror. Valentina Rossi turned slowly, her designer dress flowing like liquid silk around her transformed figure. Gone was the vulnerable woman he'd dismissed 4 years ago. In her place stood a goddess of success and fury, her dark hair swept into an elegant chignon, diamonds glittering at her throat, diamonds she'd clearly bought herself. No, Adrian. Her voice cut through the ambient chatter of Milan's elite like a blade through silk. They're mine. Luna, Marco, come to mama. The twins, his twins, looked up at him with curious, innocent faces that made his chest cavity feel like it was collapsing. The little girl had his eyes and her mother's delicate features. The boy had his strong jawline and that same thoughtful expression Adrian wore when calculating business deals. Mommy. The little girl, Luna, tugged at Valentina's dress. Why does that man look sad? Valentina knelt down gracefully, never breaking eye contact with Adrian. Sometimes, Angel, people get sad when they realize they've made terrible mistakes. Can we help him? The boy, Marco, asked with the devastating innocence of childhood. Some people, Valentina said, standing slowly, have to help themselves. Have you ever made a choice that destroyed everything you thought you wanted? Have you ever built an empire worth $800 million only to discover you'd lost treasures worth more than all the money in the world? Tonight's story will shatter everything you believe about success, family, and what happens when a man who has everything realizes he actually has nothing at all. If you've ever had to choose between ambition and love, hit that like button right now, because Adrian Montclair's story might just change your life. For years and 3 months earlier, Adrian Montclair stood in his corner office on the 62nd floor of Montclair Media headquarters, gazing out at Milan's glittering skyline like a modern-day emperor surveying his domain. At 35, he controlled an empire worth $800 million, fashion magazines, digital platforms, media companies that shaped trends and made careers across Europe. His office was a monument to success. Floor-to-ceiling windows, marble imported from Carrara, a conference table that had hosted deals worth hundreds of millions. The walls displayed magazine covers featuring supermodels and fashion weeks, all under his media umbrella. Every surface gleamed with the cold perfection of unlimited wealth. Mr. Montclair, his assistant Margaret's voice crackled through the intercom. Ms. Rossi is here for your 3 p.m. Adrian barely looked up from his monitors, displaying stock prices and acquisition reports. Send her in. And Margaret, I need the Versini projections on my desk within the hour. Yes, sir. The door opened, and Valentina Rossi walked into his sterile kingdom like a breath of warm spring air. She wore a simple but elegant black dress that hugged her curves, her dark hair falling in waves around her shoulders. In her hands, she carried a leather portfolio and a small glass vial that caught the afternoon light. Adrian, she said softly, but he held up one finger without looking at her. Just 1 second, Cara. This email could close the Barcelona expansion. His fingers flew across the keyboard while she stood there, portfolio clutched to her chest like armor. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only 90 seconds, Adrian finally looked up. Sorry, love. You know how it is. When opportunity calls, everything else has to wait. Valentina's smile was strained. Everything else? You know what I mean. Adrian stood and moved around his desk, but instead of embracing her, he gestured toward the chairs facing his workspace. So, what brings you to my office? We have dinner reservations at 8. Couldn't this wait? Actually, no. Valentina sat down carefully, crossing her legs with the grace that had first caught his attention at Milan Fashion Week 8 months ago. I wanted to show you something. She opened her portfolio and pulled out a series of photographs, elegant bottles with minimalist labels, artistic shots of perfume displays in high-end boutiques. The Rossi Fragrances Fall Collection launched last week, she said, a note of pride creeping into her voice. Harrods wants to carry the signature line, and Bergdorf Goodman called this morning about exclusive distribution in New York. Adrian glanced at the photos while simultaneously checking his phone for messages. That's wonderful, Valentina. Really impressive for such a small operation. The pause before small operation hit her like a slap. Adrian, this represents 2 years of work. Every formula, every scent profile, every marketing strategy. And I'm proud of you, he said, but his attention was already drifting back to his screens. Listen, can we discuss this tonight? The Versini deal is heating up, and if I can close this acquisition, we're looking at a €200 million expansion into Eastern Europe. We, the company, Montclair Media. Adrian finally focused on her fully, and for a moment, she remembered why she'd fallen for him so completely. When Adrian Montclair turned his full attention on something or someone, it was like being caught in a spotlight powered by a nuclear reactor. Valentina, if this deal goes through, will be the largest independent fashion media conglomerate in Europe. And if it doesn't, it will. I've spent 6 months positioning every element of this acquisition. I know Roberto Versini's debt structure better than his own accountants. I know which board members can be swayed and which ones need to be replaced. I know. His phone buzzed with an urgent message. Without even apologizing, Adrian's eyes flicked to the screen. It's Versini's lawyer, he said, already reaching for the device. I have to take this. Adrian, please. Just 5 more minutes. I need to tell you something important. After this call, I promise. This could be the breakthrough we've been waiting for. He answered the phone in rapid Italian, pacing behind his desk while Valentina sat forgotten in her chair. She watched him gesture emphatically, his voice rising with excitement as he negotiated terms and timelines. This was Adrian in his element, a master of the universe reshaping reality through sheer force of will and strategic brilliance. It was also Adrian at his most disconnected from everything that wasn't business. 15 minutes later, he hung up with the triumphant expression of a general who'd just won a decisive battle. They're ready to negotiate final terms, he announced, loosening his tie. Valentina, this is it. This is the deal that changes everything. Changes everything for who? For us. For our future. For the empire we're building. Valentina stood slowly, gathering her photographs with hands that trembled slightly. Our empire. Yes, our... Adrian stopped mid-sentence, finally registering the tone in her voice. What's wrong? You seem upset. When was the last time you asked about my day, Adrian? Not my business, not my work, my day. What do you mean? When was the last time we had dinner together without you checking your phone? When was the last time we made love without you getting up immediately afterward to review market reports? Adrian's brow furrowed in genuine confusion. Valentina, you knew who I was when we started this relationship. You knew that my work requires total devotion, complete sacrifice, the absolute prioritization of profit over people. Her voice was steady, but Adrian could see tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. I knew all of that. What I didn't know was that it included me. That's not fair. You're not just people to me. You're... What? What am I to you, Adrian? The question hung in the air between them like a challenge. Adrian opened his mouth to respond, but his phone buzzed again. This time, he ignored it. You're important to me, Valentina. Very important. Important like a business asset? Important like a beautiful accessory that makes you look successful at industry events? No, of course not. Then important how? Because I can't remember the last time you treated me like a woman you love instead of a beautiful object you own. Adrian's jaw tightened. I don't own you. I've never tried to own you. Haven't you? You pay for my apartment, my car, my clothes. You make decisions about where we go and what we do without consulting me. You introduced me to your business associates as my Valentina, like I'm a prized possession. I take care of you because I care about you. Because I want you to have the best of everything. The best of everything except your attention. Except your presence. Except your heart. Adrian stared at her, this woman who had somehow become essential to his carefully ordered world, and felt something cold settle in his chest. My heart? Valentina, what are we talking about here? Are we having some kind of relationship crisis because I'm busy with the most important deal of my career? No, Adrian. We're having a relationship crisis because you don't understand the difference between caring for someone and caring about someone. Before he could respond, she walked toward the door, her heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown timer. Where are you going? Home. To think. To decide whether I'm willing to keep being a beautiful object in your very expensive collection. Valentina, wait. Don't be dramatic. We can work this out. She paused with her hand on the door handle, and when she turned back, Adrian saw something in her expression that made his stomach drop. Can we? Because I'm not sure you understand what needs to be worked out. The door closed behind her with a soft click that somehow sounded like the most final thing Adrian had ever heard. He stood alone in his marble palace, surrounded by all the symbols of his success, and for the first time in his adult life, felt completely empty. His phone buzzed with another message about the Versini deal. This time, Adrian ignored it completely. 3 weeks later, Valentina returned to the 62nd floor of Montclair Media headquarters. This time, she wasn't carrying a portfolio of her latest fragrances. This time, she was carrying news that would either transform their relationship or destroy it completely. She'd spent those 3 weeks in careful thought, analyzing her relationship with Adrian like one of her perfume formulas, breaking it down into component parts, studying the chemistry, understanding what worked and what didn't. The conclusion she'd reached was both liberating and terrifying. She loved Adrian Montclair completely and desperately. She also couldn't continue loving him on his terms. Ms. Rossi, Margaret looked up from her desk with genuine warmth. Mr. Montclair is in back-to-back meetings until 6. But I can. It's all right, Margaret. He's expecting me. Which wasn't exactly true, but Valentina had learned that confidence could open doors that requests sometimes couldn't. Adrian's office door was closed, the sound of his voice carrying through the thick wood as he conducted what sounded like a heated conference call in rapid-fire Italian. Valentina knocked once and entered without waiting for permission. Absolutely unacceptable. The due diligence period was 30 days, not 45, and if Versini thinks he can, Adrian looked up, surprise flickering across his features when he saw her. Roberto, let me call you back in 10 minutes. He hung up and stood, moving around his desk with the fluid grace that always made her heart skip despite everything. Valentina, this is unexpected. His smile was warm but distracted. I thought we were meeting for dinner at Di Giacomo tonight. We need to talk now, Adrian. Before dinner. Before anything else. Something in her tone must have penetrated his business-focused brain because he actually sat down and gave her his full attention. All right. What's on your mind? Valentina had rehearsed this conversation a dozen different ways. She'd planned elaborate speeches, careful explanations, strategic approaches that would help him understand the magnitude of what she was about to tell him. But looking at him now, really looking at him in his $5,000 suit behind his marble desk in his ivory tower, all her careful words disappeared. I'm pregnant, Adrian. The silence that followed was so complete that Valentina could hear her own heartbeat. Adrian's face went through a series of micro-expressions: shock, confusion, calculation, and finally, something that looked disturbingly like annoyance. Pregnant. He repeated the word like it was in a foreign language. 3 months. 3 months. Adrian leaned back in his leather chair, his hands steepled in front of him in the pose she'd seen him adopt when analyzing particularly complex business problems. And you're certain? I've had 3 different tests and a doctor's confirmation. Yes, Adrian, I'm certain. Right. Okay. He stood and walked to his window, staring out at the city below. This is unexpected. Unexpected. Yes. The timing is particularly challenging. Valentina felt something cold begin to form in her chest. Challenging how? Valentina, you have to understand. I'm in the middle of the most important acquisition in Montclair Media's history. The Versini deal will literally double our market share in Eastern Europe. The due diligence alone requires 16-hour days, and once we close, the integration process will be Adrian. Her voice cut through his business recitation like a blade. I'm not asking you to stop working. I'm telling you that we're going to have a baby. A baby? He turned from the window to face her, and the expression in his eyes made her stomach clench. Valentina, surely you understand that this is terrible timing. Terrible timing. From a business perspective, yes. I can't possibly manage a major acquisition and this situation simultaneously. This situation? Valentina's voice rose slightly. Adrian, we're talking about your child. Are we? The question hung in the air like poison gas. Valentina staggered backward as if he'd physically struck her. What did you just say? I'm not questioning your fidelity, Adrian said quickly, but the damage was already done. I'm questioning the wisdom of bringing a child into our lives when I can't guarantee the time or emotional availability that would require. Can't or won't. Does it matter? The result is the same. The result is the same. Valentina stared at this man she thought she'd known, this man who could touch her body with reverent passion one night and coldly calculate the inconvenience of their child the next day. Adrian, what exactly are you saying? I'm saying we need to think about this logically. Practically. He moved to his desk and pulled out his checkbook with the same businesslike efficiency he used for every other transaction. I'm saying that if you choose to go through with this pregnancy, I'll provide financial support. Generous financial support. If I choose to go through with this pregnancy. Valentina, be reasonable. A child would fundamentally alter both our lives. Your perfume business is just starting to gain traction. Pregnancy and motherhood would derail that momentum completely. My expansion into Eastern Europe represents a 5-year strategic plan that requires absolute focus and stop. Valentina's voice was barely above a whisper, but it cut through his monologue like a scream. Just stop talking. I'm trying to be practical here. A child represents a complication, an inconvenience, a threat to your precious empire. Adrian's jaw tightened. A responsibility that neither of us is prepared for. Valentina, think about this rationally. What do we know about raising children? What do we know about the kind of sacrifice and commitment that parenthood requires? I know that children need love more than they need business plans. Love doesn't pay for private schools or medical care or security or presence or attention or a father who values them more than his stock portfolio. Adrian moved around his desk toward her, and despite everything, Valentina's body still responded to his proximity with traitorous heat. Valentina, I'm not saying I don't want children eventually. I'm saying the timing is impossible. When would the timing be possible, Adrian? After the Versini deal? After the next acquisition? After you've conquered every market in Europe and moved on to Asia? After I've built something permanent? Something that can provide security and opportunity for a family? You mean after you've built something more important to you than the family itself? That's not fair, isn't it? Valentina walked to his window and stared out at the city below, her reflection ghost-like in the glass. When was the last time we had an entire weekend together without you working? When was the last time you chose my company over a business opportunity? My work provides for us. It provides for this relationship. No, Adrian. Your work has replaced this relationship. I've become a beautiful accessory to your successful life, and now you want me to choose between our child and your convenience. I want you to choose rationally, logically. I want you to choose the option that makes the most sense for both our futures. Valentina turned back to face him, and Adrian was startled by the transformation in her expression. The soft, romantic woman who had been sharing his bed for 8 months was gone, replaced by someone harder, colder, more determined. Our futures. Yes. Tell me, Adrian, in these futures you're planning, where exactly do you see this child fitting in? Between board meetings? During your lunch breaks? As a weekend hobby when you're not acquiring new companies? Valentina, you're being emotional. I'm being a mother. I'm being someone who understands that a child isn't a business proposition to be scheduled and managed and optimized for efficiency. Adrian moved closer to her, close enough that she could smell his expensive cologne, close enough that her body remembered every night they'd spent tangled together in passionate oblivion. I care about you, he said quietly. I care about us, but I won't pretend that a child wouldn't fundamentally change everything about our lives. It would. It absolutely would. So you understand. I understand that you're terrified of anything you can't control. I understand that you've built your entire identity around being a master of the universe who shapes reality through force of will and strategic thinking. I understand that a child represents chaos and unpredictability and emotional messiness that doesn't fit into your perfectly ordered world. That's not. What I don't understand is how the man who can risk hundreds of millions on business deals is too afraid to risk his heart on his own child. The words hung between them like a bridge, dangerous to cross, impossible to ignore. Adrian stared at her for a long moment, and Valentina saw something flicker in his eyes that might have been fear or longing or both. What if I'm not good at it? He said finally, his voice barely audible. What if I can't be the kind of father a child deserves? For just a moment, Valentina's heart softened. In that question, she heard an echo of the man she'd fallen in love with, brilliant but vulnerable, powerful but uncertain about anything that couldn't be measured in profit margins. Then you learn, she said gently. You grow. You let this child teach you things that no business school ever could. And if I can't? If I'm too set in my ways, too focused on work, then you choose, Adrian. You choose what matters more, the empire you're building or the family you could have. Why does it have to be a choice? Why can't I have both? Because both requires presence. Both requires emotional availability. Both requires putting someone else's needs ahead of your own agenda, and I don't think you're capable of that. That's not fair. Prove me wrong. Adrian stared at her, this woman who had somehow become essential to his world, and felt the ground shifting beneath his feet like an earthquake. I need time to think, he said finally. How much time? I don't know. This changes everything, Valentina. Everything I've planned, everything I've worked for, everything you've planned without including me in the planning. That's not true, isn't it? Adrian, when you imagine your future, your real future, not the public relations version, what do you see? Adrian was quiet for a long moment. I see success, recognition, the kind of empire that lasts generations. And where am I in that vision? Where is our child? You're part of it. Of course you are. How? As what? Beautiful decorations for your achievements? Proof of your virility and success? Living trophies in your collection? You're twisting my words. I'm asking for clarity. I'm asking you to tell me honestly whether you want a child or whether you want the appearance of having a perfect family to complement your perfect empire. Adrian opened his mouth to respond, but his phone rang. The sound cut through their conversation like a knife, and Valentina watched his eyes flick automatically toward the device. Don't, she warned. Don't you dare answer that phone right now. It could be Versini's team. We are supposed to be having the most important conversation of our lives. After I close this deal, there will always be another deal, Adrian. Always another acquisition, another opportunity, another crisis that's more important than the people in your life. That's not true. Prove it. Choose me. Choose us. Choose this child. Right now. In this moment. Choose something other than business. The phone continued ringing. Adrian's hand moved toward it instinctively. I can't, he said finally. I can't just ignore everything I've worked for. Then you've already made your choice. Valentina gathered her purse and walked toward the door, each step feeling like a small death. Valentina, wait. We're not finished talking about this. Yes, we are. She paused with her hand on the door handle. Because there's nothing left to talk about. You've shown me exactly where I rank in your priorities, and our child doesn't even make the list. You're being unfair. You're forcing me to choose between. I'm not forcing you to choose anything, Adrian. I'm simply accepting the choice you've already made. What does that mean? It means I won't take your money. I won't take your grudging support or your scheduled visits or your carefully managed emotional availability. I won't turn our child into another item on your business agenda. So what will you do? Valentina turned back to face him one last time, and Adrian was startled by the strength he saw in her expression. I'll do what I should have done months ago. I'll choose myself. I'll choose our child. I'll build a life that doesn't require your permission or your presence or your financial support. Valentina, you can't be serious. How will you support yourself? Your business barely breaks even. I'll figure it out. You're not thinking clearly. The pregnancy hormones, the shock. You need to consider this logically. I'm thinking clearly. Probably for the first time since I met you. What does that mean? It means I finally see you for who you really are. Not the brilliant, passionate man I fell in love with, but the calculating businessman who sees everything, including the woman carrying his child, as either an asset or a liability. That's not who I am, isn't it? When was the last time you looked at me and saw a woman instead of a beautiful accessory to your successful life? When was the last time you wanted my opinion on something other than which restaurant would impress your business associates? The questions hung between them, unanswered because they both knew the truth. I do care about you, Adrian said finally. More than you know. I believe you do. In your way. But your way isn't enough for me anymore, and it won't be enough for our child. Our child who will grow up without a father. Our child who will grow up knowing that they are loved completely and unconditionally, not as an addition to someone else's empire, but as the center of their mother's world. Adrian stared at her, this woman who had somehow become essential to his carefully ordered universe, and felt something cracking inside his chest. You'll change your mind, he said quietly. When the reality of single motherhood sets in, when you realize what you're giving up, what I'm giving up is the illusion that I matter to you more than your stock portfolio. What I'm gaining is the chance to love our child the way they deserve to be loved. And what about us? There is no us, Adrian. There's you, and your empire, and your endless acquisitions. And there's me, choosing something better. She walked through the door and closed it softly behind her, but the sound echoed through Adrian's office like a gunshot. He stood alone in his marble palace, surrounded by all the symbols of his success and none of the people who were supposed to make it meaningful. His phone stopped ringing. The silence that followed was the loudest thing Adrian had ever heard. For the first time in his adult life, he ignored the urgent messages waiting for his attention and simply stood at his window, watching the woman he loved disappear into the streets of Milan, carrying his child and his last chance at something real. The Versini deal could wait. But by the time Adrian realized that, it was already too late. 18 months after Valentina walked out of his office, Adrian Montclair sat in the same corner office, now expanded to encompass the entire 62nd floor. The Versini acquisition had been completed successfully, adding $300 million to his net worth and making Montclair Media the largest independent fashion and lifestyle publisher in Europe. He had everything he'd ever wanted. He had never been more miserable in his life. "Sir." Margaret's voice came through the intercom. "The quarterly board meeting is starting in conference room A. I'll be there in 5 minutes," Adrian replied, but he didn't move from his position at the window. Below him, Milan pulsed with energy and ambition. Somewhere in that maze of streets and ambitions, Valentina was raising their child. Their child. The phrase still hit him like a physical blow every time he thought it. Adrian had hired the most discreet private investigator in Milan 6 months after Valentina left. He'd told himself it was just for peace of mind, just to ensure she was safe and healthy. The reports that arrived monthly on his desk told a story that both amazed and tortured him. Valentina Rossi had not just survived his abandonment. She had transformed it into fuel for an empire of her own. The latest report lay open on his desk. Subject gave birth to twins on March 15th, Luna Rossi, girl, and Marco Rossi, boy, both healthy. Subject has relocated to a modest apartment in the Navigli district. Rossi Fragrances has secured distribution deals with Harrods, Bergdorf Goodman, and Le Bon Marché. Company valuation estimated at €15 million and growing rapidly. Twins. He had twins. A daughter and a son who carried his DNA but not his name, his features but not his presence. Adrian picked up the manila envelope that had arrived that morning, the investigator's latest batch of photographs. He knew he shouldn't look. He knew it was a violation of Valentina's privacy and his own sanity. But he couldn't stop himself. The first photo showed Valentina pushing a double stroller through a park, her face radiant with a happiness Adrian had never seen when she was with him. She wore simple clothes, jeans and a sweater, but she moved with a confidence and purpose that made his chest ache. The second photo nearly stopped his heart. 2 toddlers, approximately 18 months old, playing in that same park. The little girl had his eyes, those distinctive storm gray eyes that were rare and unmistakable. The boy had his jawline, his nose, the way Adrian held his head when he was concentrating. They were beautiful. They were his. And they had no idea he existed. "Mr. Montclair?" Margaret's voice came through the intercom again. "The board is waiting." "Tell them I'll be delayed," Adrian said, his voice rough. "Family emergency." Which was both a lie and the absolute truth. Adrian had seen the twins 3 times in person over the past year, always from a distance, always careful to remain unnoticed. The first time had been at a children's museum on a rainy Tuesday morning. He'd watched Luna examine a butterfly display with scientific curiosity while Marco tried to figure out how the interactive exhibits worked. They moved with confidence and joy, secure in their mother's love, unaware that their father was watching from behind a pillar like some kind of stalker. The second time had been at a playground in the Brera district. Valentina had been talking to another mother while the twins played on the swings. Luna had scraped her knee and run crying to her mother for comfort. Adrian had watched Valentina scoop her daughter up, kiss the minor injury, and within minutes have her laughing again. The ease with which she handled the crisis, the natural instinct for comfort and care, it was everything Adrian had never learned how to do. The third time had been the most painful. He'd seen them at a small cafe near Valentina's apartment, celebrating what he later realized were the twins' second birthdays. There were balloons and cake and a few friends, nothing elaborate or expensive. But Luna and Marco had been absolutely radiant with joy, and Valentina had looked at her children with such pure, uncomplicated love that Adrian had felt like an intruder witnessing something sacred. That night, he'd gone home to his penthouse, now professionally decorated by Milan's most exclusive interior design firm, and realized that his marble palace felt more like a mausoleum than a home. His phone rang, jolting him from his memories. The display showed Roberto Versini's number. Adrian mio amico. Roberto's enthusiastic voice filled the office. I have wonderful news. The Prague expansion is ahead of schedule, and we're already seeing 200% growth in digital subscriptions. This partnership has exceeded every projection. That's excellent, Roberto. You don't sound excited. This means another 100 million in revenue for the fiscal year. I'm thrilled, Adrian said flatly. Adrian, are you feeling well? This is the kind of success we dreamed about when we first discussed the merger. I'm fine. Just tired. Perhaps you need a vacation. When was the last time you took real time off? Adrian couldn't remember. Work had become his drug of choice, the only thing that kept his mind off the hollow ache in his chest where his family should have been. I'll consider it, he lied. Good. And Adrian? Maybe it's time you found yourself a nice woman. A man your age needs more than just business success. The irony was so sharp it nearly made Adrian laugh. I'll keep that in mind. After hanging up, Adrian pulled out his laptop and did something he'd been doing obsessively for months. He Googled Valentina's name. The search results told the story of a woman who had not just survived but thrived. There were articles about Rossi fragrances in industry magazines, interviews where Valentina discussed her innovative approach to sustainable perfume manufacturing, photos from fashion events where she appeared confident and radiant. In every photo, she looked like success incarnate, but more than that, she looked genuinely happy. The most recent article, published just 2 weeks ago in Italian Vogue, featured a profile titled The Nose That Knows, How Valentina Rossi Built Europe's Most Exclusive Fragrance House. The accompanying photo showed her in her laboratory, surrounded by glass bottles and testing strips, her face animated with passion as she explained her latest creation. Perfume is memory made tangible, she was quoted as saying. Every scent tells a story, triggers an emotion, connects us to moments that define who we are. My goal is to create fragrances that don't just smell beautiful. They make the wearer feel beautiful, confident, loved. Loved. Adrian stared at that word until it blurred on the screen. His intercom buzzed for the third time. Mr. Montclair, the board is asking if we should reschedule. I'm coming, Adrian said sharply, shoving the photographs back into their envelope. The quarterly board meeting was held in Montclair Media's palatial conference room, with its 20-foot table and chairs that cost more than most people's cars. 12 of Europe's most successful media executives sat around that table, discussing profit margins and market expansion and strategic positioning. Adrian took his place at the head of the table and listened to reports about circulation numbers and advertising revenue and digital transformation initiatives. Every number was positive. Every projection showed growth. Every metric indicated that Montclair Media was not just successful but dominant in its market. He felt absolutely nothing. Adrian, said Patricia Lombardi, is Chief Operating Officer and one of the sharpest minds in European media. The lifestyle division wants to launch a new luxury family magazine. Market research shows tremendous opportunity in the high-end parenting demographic. Luxury family magazine, Adrian repeated. Yes. Think Architectural Digest meets modern parenting. Beautiful homes, designer children's clothes, exclusive schools, family travel to exotic destinations. The target demographic is affluent parents who want the best of everything for their children. Adrian stared at Patricia, this brilliant woman who was describing exactly the kind of lifestyle he could have provided for his twins, and felt something cold settle in his stomach. What would we call it? He asked quietly. We're considering several titles. Elite family, luxury living with children, modern heritage. And the content? Features on celebrity parents, profiles of exclusive family resorts, guides to the best private schools in Europe, articles about raising cultured, successful children. Successful children, Adrian repeated. Yes. Children who are positioned from birth to excel academically, socially, culturally. Children who have every advantage money can provide. What about children who just have love? The question slipped out before Adrian could stop it. The entire conference room fell silent, 12 pairs of eyes staring at him with varying degrees of confusion. I'm sorry, Patricia said. Nothing. The magazine sounds profitable. Move forward with development. But as the meeting continued, Adrian couldn't stop thinking about those photographs of Luna and Marco playing in the park. They didn't have designer clothes or exclusive schools or luxury family vacations. What they had was a mother who looked at them like they were the most precious things in the universe. After the meeting, Adrian retreated to his office and pulled out his phone. For the 100th time, he scrolled to Valentina's number, the same number she'd had when they were together. His finger hovered over the call button. What would he say? Hello, Valentina. I've been stalking you and our children for 2 years, and I'd like to schedule some time to meet them. I've built the empire I thought was more important than family, and it turns out it's completely meaningless without someone to share it with. I was wrong about everything, and I don't know how to fix it. Adrian set the phone down without calling. Outside his window, Milan glittered with the lights of ambition and success. Somewhere in that maze of dreams and disappointments, his children were probably having dinner, sharing their day with their mother, laughing at jokes he would never hear. He had gained an empire and lost a universe. For the first time since Valentina left, Adrian Montclair began to understand the true cost of his choices. But understanding and knowing how to fix things were two entirely different problems. And as his children grew older with each passing day, as they formed memories and personalities and relationships that didn't include him, Adrian began to realize that some opportunities, once lost, might be impossible to reclaim. The question that haunted his sleepless nights was whether he would find the courage to try anyway. For years and 3 months after Valentina Rossi walked out of his life, Adrian Montclair stood in the Palazzo Reale gallery at Milan's most exclusive charity auction, surrounded by Italy's cultural elite. He'd attended this event for 3 consecutive years, not out of genuine interest in art, but because it was where Milan's most influential people gathered to see and be seen. Tonight felt different. Tonight, Adrian felt restless in his perfectly tailored Armani tuxedo, disconnected from the conversations about market valuations and social positioning swirling around him. He'd been feeling this way more often lately, like an actor who'd forgotten his lines in a play he no longer wanted to perform. Adrian. Roberto Versini appeared at his elbow, champagne glass in hand, his face flushed with the satisfaction of a man who'd just closed another lucrative deal. Have you seen the Monet they're auctioning tonight? Magnificent piece. I'm thinking of bidding. It would look perfect in the Prague office. I'm sure it would, Adrian replied absently, his attention caught by a commotion near the contemporary art section. A small crowd had gathered around something or someone, generating the kind of excited energy that usually accompanied either a celebrity sighting or a major social scandal. Adrian found himself moving toward the disturbance, drawn by a curiosity he couldn't quite explain. As he got closer, he heard fragments of conversation. Valentina Rossi herself. Signature fragrance sold out in 3 days. Turned down offers from both L'Oreal and Estée Lauder. Build her empire from absolutely nothing. The crowd shifted, and Adrian's world stopped. There she was. Valentina Rossi stood in the center of the admirers like a goddess holding court, but everything about her had transformed. Gone was the vulnerable woman who had once looked to him for validation and security. In her place stood someone radiant with self-possessed power. She wore a midnight blue silk dress that flowed around her figure like liquid starlight. Her dark hair was swept into an elegant chignon that showcased the graceful line of her neck, now adorned with diamonds that caught the gallery lights like captured fire. Diamonds she had clearly bought herself. Everything about her posture, her expression, her presence radiated the kind of confidence that couldn't be faked or bought. This wasn't just success. This was transformation. Valentina, Sofia Benedetti from Italian Vogue was saying, "Tell us about your latest creation." The rumors about the new signature line have the entire industry buzzing. Valentina's laugh was musical, completely relaxed. "I never discuss works in progress at social events, Sofia. That's how rumors become disappointments. But surely you can give us a hint? Something to tide over your devoted followers. I will say this, it's a sin inspired by new beginnings. By the courage to choose authenticity over approval, love over luxury." Her eyes swept the crowd with amused warmth. Sometimes the most beautiful fragrances come from the most difficult transformations. Adrian felt those words hit him like physical blows. Every syllable seemed designed to remind him of what he'd thrown away, what he'd forced her to become without him. "Mommy, can we look at the pretty pictures now?" The small voice cut through the sophisticated chatter like a silver bell, and Adrian's blood turned to ice water. A little girl had appeared at Valentina's side, 4 years old, maybe 5, with glossy dark hair and the kind of natural beauty that promised to stop hearts when she grew up. But it was her eyes that made Adrian's world tilt off its axis. Storm gray eyes. His eyes. Unmistakably, undeniably his eyes staring back at him from a face that was otherwise pure Valentina. Of course, Angel, Valentina said, her voice softening with maternal warmth as she placed a protective hand on the child's shoulder. Luna, say goodbye to the nice people. Luna. His daughter's name was Luna. Goodbye, nice people, Luna said with the unself-conscious charm of childhood, causing delighted laughter from the gathered adults. But Adrian barely heard the sound because a second child had appeared, a boy with the same dark hair and delicate features, but carrying Adrian's jawline, his nose, the way Adrian held his head when he was thinking deeply about something. Twins. He had twins. The mathematical certainty hit him like a freight train. 4 years old. Born approximately 9 months after Valentina had walked out of his office carrying news he'd been too stupid and selfish to appreciate. And this handsome young man must be Marco, Sophia said, clearly charmed by both children. I'm Marco, the boy confirmed with serious dignity. I'm 4 3/4, and I like to know how things work. How things work? Sophia repeated, enchanted. What kinds of things? Everything. Mama's perfume machines, elevators, why some people smell sad and some people smell happy. Adrian watched this interaction, his son displaying the same analytical curiosity that had driven Adrian's own childhood, and felt something crack open in his chest cavity. People smell happy or sad? Sophia asked, genuinely intrigued. Marco has a very sensitive nose, Valentina explained, pride evident in her voice. He can detect emotional changes through scent markers that most people miss completely. It's like Mama's perfumes, Luna added helpfully. She makes smells that tell stories. What kind of stories? Sophia was now completely enchanted. Happy stories, sad stories, love stories, Luna said with the matter-of-fact wisdom of childhood. Mama made a perfume that smells like the day we were born. It smells like sunshine and new things and hope, Marco finished. It smells like hope. Adrian staggered backward as if he'd been physically struck. Valentina had created a fragrance to commemorate their birth. Their birth that he'd missed because he'd been too focused on acquisition deals and profit margins to fight for his family. It was then that Valentina's eyes found his across the crowd. For a moment that lasted an eternity, they simply stared at each other. Adrian saw a recognition flicker across her features, followed by something that might have been resignation or determination. He couldn't tell which. Mommy. Luna tugged at Valentina's dress, following her mother's gaze. Why does that man keep staring at us? The question cut through the ambient chatter like a blade. Several people turned to look at Adrian, who was standing frozen in his expensive tuxedo, his face pale with shock. Stay close to me, angels, Valentina said quietly, but her voice carried clearly enough for Adrian to hear. Sometimes grown-ups stare when they're confused about something. She began moving away from the crowd, guiding her children toward a quieter section of the gallery. Adrian found himself following, drawn by a magnetic pull he couldn't resist. Valentina. His voice stopped her near a display of contemporary sculptures. She turned slowly, her movements deliberate and controlled, buying herself time to arrange her features into a mask of polite indifference. When she faced him, Adrian was struck again by how completely she had transformed. This wasn't the same woman who had once looked to him for approval and security. This was someone who had built her own approval, created her own security, forged her own empire from the ashes of their relationship. Adrian, she said, her voice steady and professional. What a surprise. They're mine. The words escaped his lips before he could stop them, part accusation, part wonder, part desperate hope. No, Adrian, Valentina's voice was silk over steel. They're mine. Luna, Marco, go look at the pretty sculptures by the window. Stay where I can see you. The twins obeyed immediately, their natural discipline a testament to the loving but structured environment she'd created for them. Adrian watched them go, noting the way they moved with confidence and curiosity, secure in their mother's love. 4 years old, he said, his voice rough. Just turned 4 last month. You never told me. You made it very clear you didn't want to know. Valentina's tone was matter-of-fact, without heat or accusation, simply stating a truth they both knew. Adrian stepped closer, and despite every rational thought in his head, he could see that Valentina's body still responded to his proximity, a slight flush at her throat, the subtle shift in her breathing. She still wore perfume, something elegant and complex that made him dizzy with memories of nights when they'd been everything to each other. I was wrong, he said quietly. About everything. Were you? Valentina tilted her head slightly, studying him with the clinical interest she might give a particularly complex fragrance formula. Or are you just curious about the successful woman I've become despite your predictions? The subtle challenge in her voice made Adrian's pulse quicken. This version of Valentina was magnificent, sharp, confident, utterly self-possessed. Successful? He asked, though he already knew the answer from his investigators' reports. Rossi Fragrances, she said with a slight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Perhaps you've heard of it? We just signed an exclusive distribution deal with Harrods. Our signature scent sold out in 3 days. Adrian felt the words hit him like physical blows. You build a company. I built an empire. The words were deliberately chosen, a direct reference to his own rhetoric from 4 years ago. Turns out I had more motivation than I realized. Papa, look. Luna's excited voice carried across the gallery space, and for a heart-stopping moment, Adrian thought she was calling to him. But when he turned, he saw the twins were examining a kinetic sculpture, and Luna was calling to another man who had approached them. David Chin. Adrian recognized him from the investigators' photographs, a widowed high school English teacher with 2 children of his own, someone who had somehow become a fixture in his children's lives. Adrian watched David kneel down to Luna's level, pointing out details in the sculpture with patient enthusiasm. Marco immediately began asking questions about how the moving parts worked, and David answered each query with the kind of focused attention that Adrian had never learned to give. They call him Papa, Adrian said, the words feeling like ground glass in his throat. They call him David, Valentina corrected. He's someone important to us. Important how? Important in all the ways that matter. He reads to them. He comes to their school events. He helps with homework. He's present for the ordinary moments that make up a childhood. Each word was a perfectly aimed arrow finding its target. Adrian understood exactly what she was telling him. David Chun had become the father Adrian had chosen not to be. I'd like to see you again, Adrian said urgently. To talk. About the children, about everything. There's nothing to discuss. They're my children too, Valentina. Biologically, yes. Her voice was steady, implacable. In every other way that matters, they're mine alone. That could change. The subtle threat in his voice made something dangerous flicker in Valentina's eyes. Are you planning to challenge me legally, Adrian? Because I should warn you, I'm not the same naive woman you dismissed 4 years ago. I'm not threatening you. I'm asking for a chance. A chance to what? To discover that parenthood is inconvenient after all? To offer them the same emotional availability you offered me? Adrian's jaw tightened. People change. Do they? Because you look exactly the same to me. Same expensive suit, same calculating look, same assumption that everything and everyone can be acquired if you just find the right price. Comment below and let me know. Do you think Adrian deserves a second chance, or has he lost the right to be in his children's lives forever? Before Adrian could respond, Luna came running back, tugging on Valentina's dress with typical 4-year-old urgency. Mama, that lady said my dress is beautiful. She wants to know where you bought it. Which lady? Angel? The one with the red hair by the paintings. Valentina recognized the description, Sophia Benedetti, and having Sophia notice Luna was both a compliment and a complication she didn't need right now. Tell her thank you, but we need to go soon. Adrian crouched down to Luna's eye level before Valentina could stop him. The move was instinctive, and he found himself looking into eyes that were mirror images of his own. Hello, Luna, he said softly. I'm Adrian. You have very beautiful eyes. Luna studied him with the serious consideration that children brought to important decisions. They look like mine. Yes, they do. Are you Mama's friend? The simple question hung in the air between them like a bridge, dangerous to cross, impossible to ignore. Valentina watched carefully, waiting to see how Adrian would handle this moment. I knew your mama before you were born, Adrian said carefully, his voice gentle. We were close friends. Do you want to be close friends again? Out of the mouths of babes. Valentina felt heat creeping up her neck as Adrian's eyes met hers over Luna's head. I'd like that very much, he said softly, but he was looking at Valentina when he said it. If your mama thinks it's a good idea. Mama's very smart, Luna announced with the absolute certainty of childhood. She knows lots of things about everything. Yes, Adrian said, his voice carrying undertones that made Valentina's carefully constructed defenses waver. She does. Marco appeared at Valentina's other side, having inherited his father's ability to move silently when he wanted to. He studied Adrian with the frank curiosity of a child who had never learned to hide his thoughts. "Who's this?" he asked. "This is Adrian," Valentina said before anyone else could answer. "He's someone I used to know." "Are you rich?" Marco asked with the blunt honesty that made adults uncomfortable and children truthful. Adrian's mouth quirked up in what might have been genuine amusement. "Some people think so." "Why do you ask?" "Because you smell expensive. Like Mama's fancy perfumes." "But—" Marco tilted his head, considering. "But sat underneath. Like when people buy things to feel better, but it doesn't work." The observation hit Adrian like a perfectly aimed arrow. This 4-year-old had just diagnosed his entire existence with the casual precision of a trained therapist. "Marco," Valentina warned gently, but Adrian held up a hand. "It's a fair observation," he said, his voice oddly rough. "You're very perceptive." "Mama says I have a good nose for truth," Marco said matter-of-factly. "Your mama is right. Truth is important." "Do you want to know a truth?" Luna asked with the generous impulse of childhood. "I'd be honored to hear it." "You look like you need a hug." The simple statement nearly undid Adrian completely. This child, his child, had seen through his expensive suit and calculated composure to the hollow ache he carried everywhere. "That's very kind of you to notice," he managed. "Would you like one?" Luna asked with the matter-of-fact generosity of a 4-year-old who had never learned that love could be conditional. Valentina started to intervene, but Adrian's expression stopped her. There was wonder in his face, and something that looked almost like hunger, not the predatory hunger she remembered, but the desperate hunger of a man dying of thirst who had just been offered water. "If your mama says it's okay," Adrian said carefully. All eyes turned to Valentina. She felt the weight of this moment, understanding that whatever she said would ripple forward into all their futures. "One hug," she said finally. "Then we really do need to go." Luna launched herself into Adrian's arms with the complete trust that children gave to the world before it taught them to be careful. Adrian caught her carefully, as if she were made of spun glass and morning light. Over Luna's head, his eyes met Valentina's, and she saw tears threatening to spill over. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" "For her. For them. For—" His voice broke slightly. "For not keeping them from this moment." Marco, not to be outdone by his sister, moved closer and patted Adrian's arm with the serious compassion of a child who understood sadness. "It's okay," Marco said solemnly. "Mama says sometimes grown-ups get lost and forget how to be happy. But hugs help." Adrian looked down at this boy, his son, who was offering comfort with the casual wisdom of someone who had been raised by a mother who understood that love was the answer to most of life's complications. "Your mama is very wise," Adrian said. "She's the wisest person in the whole world," Luna announced loyally, pulling back to look at Adrian seriously. "She makes perfumes that smell like feelings, and she always knows what to do when we're scared or sad or confused." "What kind of feelings?" Adrian asked, genuinely curious. "All kinds. She made one that smells like the first day of school, nervous but excited. And one that smells like Christmas morning. And one that smells like when you miss someone you love. That last one sounds beautiful and sad." "It is," Marco said solemnly. "Mama cried when she made it. But then she smiled too, so I think it was happy sad, not just sad. Adrian looked at Valentina, understanding perfectly what fragrance her son was describing. She had created a scent that captured missing someone you loved. "Missing him. I should take them home," Valentina said quietly, recognizing the dangerous territory they were entering. "It's past their bedtime." "Of course," Adrian said, but he seemed reluctant to release Luna from his arms. "Will we see you again?" Luna asked with the straightforward hope of childhood. "Would you like to?" "Yes," Luna said immediately. "You seem nice. And you smell like Mama when she's missing someone." "Luna," Valentina said gently, "we should go." But Adrian had already pulled out his business card, writing something on the back before handing it to Valentina. "My private number," he said quietly. In case you ever want to talk." Valentina took the card without looking at it. "I should warn you, Adrian, my life is very different now. My priorities are very clear." "So are mine," he said, his voice carrying a conviction she'd never heard before. For the first time in years, they're completely clear. Ristorante Krakow hummed with the sophisticated energy of Milan's elite 3 days later. Adrian had chosen a private corner table, away from curious eyes and smartphone cameras. The restaurant's understated elegance, white tablecloths, Crystal stemware, soft lighting, provided the perfect backdrop for what might be the most important conversation of his life. He'd arrived 15 minutes early, something he never did for business meetings, but found himself doing instinctively for this encounter. His hands were steady as he adjusted his tie, but inside, his heart hammered with the kind of nervous energy he hadn't felt since his first major acquisition. When Valentina appeared in the entrance, Adrian's breath caught in his throat. She wore a simple but elegant black dress that moved like liquid silk around her figure. Her hair fell in waves around her shoulders, and she moved with the confident grace of a woman who had learned to navigate the world on her own terms. Every head in the restaurant turned as she followed the maitre d' to their table. Valentina Rossi had become someone people noticed, not just because of her beauty, but because of the aura of success and self-possession that surrounded her like expensive perfume. "You look," Adrian began as he stood to greet her, then stopped, seeming to search for words. "Different," she supplied, settling into her chair with fluid grace. "Powerful, confident, like you've grown into yourself completely." "Necessity is an excellent teacher," Valentina replied, accepting the wine menu from their server with a polite smile. Adrian winced slightly at the implication. "Valentina, I owe you an apology. More than an apology. I owe you an explanation, and probably a lifetime of making amends. I'm listening." She folded her hands on the white tablecloth between them, and Adrian noticed she no longer wore the delicate gold bracelet he'd given her for their 6-month anniversary. Instead, her wrist bore an elegant watch that looked both expensive and professional, something she'd clearly bought herself. Adrian leaned forward, his own hands clasped tightly. "4 years ago, I was a coward. I was so terrified of anything that might threaten my control, my focus, my empire, that I threw away the best thing that ever happened to me." "That's a very polished speech, Adrian." "It's not a speech. It's the truth I've been living with every day since you walked out of my office." "Have you?" Valentina's eyebrow arched skeptically. "Because from what I've read in the financial papers, your empire has only grown larger. The Versini acquisition was quite successful, from what I understand." "Yes, it was. We've expanded into Eastern Europe, acquired 3 more companies, increased my net worth by 400 million euros. Adrian's voice was flat, reciting facts without emotion. "And it's been completely meaningless." Valentina studied his face carefully, looking for signs of manipulation or performance. Instead, she saw something that looked like genuine pain etched in the lines around his eyes. "Tell me about your life these past 4 years, she said. "Work. Acquisition. More work. Board meetings and profit projections and strategic planning sessions that lasted until midnight." Adrian reached for his wine glass, then set it down without drinking. "I also couldn't sleep most nights, couldn't enjoy any of my success, and couldn't stop thinking about the woman I'd driven away and the children I'd never know." "Children," Valentina corrected. "Twins. Twins." Adrian said the word like he was tasting it for the first time. "Were you? How was the pregnancy?" "The birth? Were you alone?" For a moment, Valentina's carefully constructed walls wavered. The question had hit an old wound that hadn't quite healed. "Difficult. Expensive. Terrifying," she said quietly. "I was broke, alone, and convinced I was going to destroy their lives before they'd even begun." "God, Valentina, I'm so sorry. Don't apologize," she interrupted, her voice gaining strength. "Don't be sorry. Be better." The waiter approached to take their order, but neither of them had looked at the menu. Adrian waved him away with an apologetic gesture. "I want to know everything," Adrian said urgently, leaning forward in his chair. "Their first words, their first steps, what they're afraid of, what makes them laugh. I want to know about midnight feedings and doctor's appointments and birthday parties. I want to know about you, how you built your company, how you survived, how you became this incredible woman sitting across from me. That would take more than one dinner." "Then give me more than one dinner." Valentina set down her own wine glass and looked at him directly. "Adrian, I won't let you hurt them. Or me. Not again. I know. And I know I have no right to ask for your trust. But I'm asking anyway. Why now? Why, after 4 years of silence, do you suddenly want to be a father?" Adrian was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Because 3 months ago, I was in a car accident. Nothing serious, just a fender bender on the A4, but for about 30 seconds, I thought I was going to die. And in those 30 seconds, the only thing I could think about was you. You and the children I'd never met. The children who might never know that their father had loved them from a distance, but been too proud and too stupid to fight for them. Valentina's breath caught. You followed our lives. I hired a private investigator, Adrian admitted, shame coloring his voice. I know about Luna's art classes and Marco's fascination with how things work. I know about your company's success, your innovation in sustainable fragrance manufacturing, your reputation for treating employees like family. I know you work too hard and sleep too little and somehow still manage to be the kind of mother I watched my own mother struggle to be. That's stalking, Adrian. That's desperate longing disguised as market research. Despite herself, Valentina almost smiled. That's the most honest thing you've ever said to me. Then let me be more honest. Adrian reached across the table, not quite touching her hand, but close enough that she could feel the warmth of his skin. I love you. I've loved you since the moment you walked into my office 4 years ago with your proposal for that signature scent line. I loved you when you challenged my business practices and called my ethics into question. I loved you when you walked away from me because I was too blind to see what I was losing. And I love you now, even though I know I don't deserve a second chance. The words hung between them like a bridge, dangerous to cross, but impossible to ignore. Love isn't enough, Adrian, Valentina said quietly. I loved you too, desperately, completely. But love without respect, without partnership, without shared priorities, it's just beautiful misery. Then let me show you that I've learned to do more than love. Let me show you that I can partner, that I can prioritize, that I can be the man you needed me to be 4 years ago. And if you can't, if this is just temporary infatuation with the idea of family? Valentina's voice carried the protective steel of a mother defending her cubs. My children's hearts are at stake, Adrian. I won't let you experiment with their emotions. I'm not experimenting. I'm all in, Valentina. Completely, irrevocably, all in. The intensity in his voice made her shiver. This was the Adrian she'd fallen in love with, passionate, focused, utterly committed when something captured his attention. The question was whether his attention could sustain itself when the novelty wore off and real life set in. There would have to be rules, she said slowly. Whatever you need. You don't get to make promises to them that you can't keep. You don't get to buy their affection with expensive gifts. You don't get to waltz in and out of their lives whenever business calls. Understood? And me, us, that's a completely separate conversation. Wanting to be a father doesn't automatically make you relationship material. Also understood. They come first, Adrian. In every decision, every priority, every choice. They come first. They should. They always should have. Valentina stared at this man who had once broken her heart so completely she'd thought she might never recover. Now he sat across from her, humbled and hopeful, asking not for forgiveness but for the chance to earn it. One dinner, she said finally. With the children. At my apartment. Sunday evening. Something simple, pasta, conversation, no grand gestures. Just us. Just us. And after that? After that, we see if you're capable of the kind of consistency that children need. Adrian nodded, his relief visible. Thank you. For the chance, for everything. As they finally ordered dinner and began the careful process of getting to know each other again, Valentina found herself remembering why she'd fallen for Adrian Montclair in the first place. When he focused his attention on something, or someone, completely, the intensity was almost overwhelming. Tell me about your perfumes, Adrian said as their appetizers arrived. The children mentioned you make scents that smell like feelings. Emotional fragrance architecture, Valentina explained, her voice warming with professional passion. Most perfumes are designed to smell beautiful, but I create fragrances that make the wearer feel beautiful, confident, loved. Each scent is designed to trigger specific emotional responses, like the one that smells like missing someone you love. Valentina's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Marco told you about that. He said you cried when you made it, but then you smiled too. Happy sad. It's called Distant Hearts, Valentina said quietly. It's my best-selling fragrance, actually. Apparently, a lot of people understand that particular emotion. What does it smell like? Bergamot and white tea for the clarity of memory. Rose otto for the ache of longing. And sandalwood for the warmth of love that persists despite distance. Adrian stared at her, understanding exactly what she had created. You made a perfume about missing me. I made a perfume about missing the man I thought you could be. The distinction hit him like a physical blow. And now I know better than to fall in love with potential instead of reality. They ate in thoughtful silence for a moment, the weight of history and possibility hanging between them like expensive perfume. What would it take? Adrian asked finally. For you to believe that reality can change? Time, Valentina said simply. Consistency. Proof that your priorities have genuinely shifted, not just temporarily adjusted. How much time? As much as it takes. This isn't a business deal, Adrian. There's no timeline or negotiated terms. Either you're in this for the long haul, or you're not. I'm in it for the long haul. We'll see. If you're watching this story and you've ever had to rebuild trust after making a terrible mistake, hit subscribe right now, because what happens next will either restore your faith in second chances or break your heart completely. Sunday evening arrived with golden September light filtering through the windows of Valentina's apartment in the Navigli district. The space was everything Adrian's penthouse wasn't: warm, lived in, filled with the comfortable chaos of family life. Children's artwork covered the refrigerator, books were stacked on every available surface, and the furniture bore the gentle wear of being truly used rather than merely displayed. It was a home in the truest sense, a place where people loved each other, argued occasionally, laughed often, and built memories that would last lifetimes. Adrian stood in the doorway, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers, the kind that grew in alpine meadows, simple and beautiful, and completely unexpected from a man who usually expressed himself through luxury brands and impressive price tags. He dressed carefully for this evening, choosing dark jeans and a simple button-down shirt instead of his usual armor of expensive suits. The effect made him look younger, more approachable, less like a media mogul and more like a man hoping to make a good impression on the most important people in his life. Papa Adrian. Luna bounded toward him with the enthusiasm of a 4-year-old who had decided he was worthy of her affection. Just Adrian, Valentina corrected gently from the kitchen, where she was stirring something that smelled like heaven and home combined. Actually, Adrian said, kneeling down to Luna's level, I'm hoping to be more than just Adrian. If that's okay with your mama. What would you be? Marco asked, appearing at his sister's side with the serious curiosity that seemed to define his approach to the world. Adrian looked up at Valentina, asking permission with his eyes. She hesitated for a moment, then nodded almost imperceptibly. Well, Adrian said carefully, I'm your papa, your father. I've been away for a long time, too long, but I'd like very much to be part of your family if you'll have me. The silence that followed was deafening. Luna and Marco exchanged one of those wordless twin conversations, communicating in the secret language that only they understood. We don't have a papa, Luna said finally, her voice matter-of-fact rather than sad. I know, and I'm sorry about that. It's my fault, not yours or your mama's. Where were you? Marco asked with the devastating directness that children brought to life's most complex questions. Adrian felt the weight of that question settle on his shoulders like lead. How do you explain to a 4-year-old that you chose business deals over bedtime stories? That you prioritized profit margins over paternal love? I was lost, he said finally. I was so focused on work and business that I lost sight of what was really important. I thought building companies was more important than building a family. That's silly, Luna announced with the absolute certainty of childhood. Companies can't hug you. Adrian's laugh was rough around the edges. No, they can't. You're absolutely right. Can you hug us? Luna asked hopefully. If you want me to. Luna launched herself into his arms without hesitation, and after a moment's consideration, Marco joined the embrace. Over their heads, Adrian's eyes met Valentina's, and she saw tears threatening to spill over. You're really our papa? Marco asked, pulling back to study Adrian's face with scientific intensity. I really am. Good, Luna said matter-of-factly. We've been wanting one. Dinner was a revelation. Adrian had attended countless business dinners, charity galas, and social events, but he'd never experienced anything like this simple family meal. The pasta was perfectly al dente, the sauce rich with herbs from Valentina's small balcony garden, and the conversation was a delightful chaos of 4-year-old observations and questions. Papa Adrian, Luna said, twirling spaghetti around her fork with serious concentration. Do you like art? I do. What kind of art do you like? All kinds. But especially the kind where you can touch the sculptures and they move. Kinetic art, Marco added helpfully. Like at the museum where we met you. That's right. You both seem very interested in art. Mama takes us to museums, Luna explained. She says art helps people understand feelings they don't have words for. Your mama is very wise. She's the wisest person in the whole world, Marco said loyally. She always knows what to do when we're scared or confused. What makes you scared? Adrian asked gently. Loud noises, Luna admitted. And when grown-ups fight. When grown-ups fight, Adrian repeated, feeling another stab of guilt for the arguments Luna and Marco might have overheard before Valentina left him. But Mama never fights, Marco said. She gets sad sometimes, but she doesn't yell or throw things or make scary faces. Adrian looked across the table at Valentina, who was quietly cutting Luna's spaghetti into smaller pieces. The casual domesticity of the gesture, the natural ease with which she anticipated and met their needs, made his chest tight with admiration and regret. What about you, Marco? Adrian asked. What scares you? Nothing really scares me, Marco said with 4-year-old bravado. But I don't like it when people smell sad for a long time. People smell sad. Everyone smells like their feelings, Marco explained matter-of-factly. Happy people smell like sunshine and cookies. Sad people smell like rain on concrete. Angry people smell like burnt coffee. What do I smell like? Adrian asked, genuinely curious. Marco considered this seriously, tilting his head like a sommelier analyzing a complex wine. You smell complicated, he said finally. Like expensive things and important meetings, but also like missing someone. And, he paused, concentrating. Like hope. You smell like hope that's been hiding for a long time. The observation hit Adrian like a perfectly aimed arrow. This 4-year-old had just diagnosed his entire emotional state with the casual precision of a trained therapist. You're very perceptive, Adrian managed. Mama says I have a good nose for truth. Your mama is right. Truth is important. The most important, Luna agreed. Mama says lying makes people smell sick. After dinner, Adrian helped clear the table, a simple domestic gesture that felt both foreign and natural. He'd never done dishes in his penthouse. He had staff for such things. But here, in this warm kitchen filled with the sound of children's laughter, washing plates felt like a privilege. You don't have to do that, Valentina said quietly, but Adrian shook his head. I want to be part of this. As they worked side by side, their hands occasionally brushing as they passed dishes, Adrian felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the simple pleasure of shared domestic responsibility. There was something profoundly intimate about this ordinary task, more meaningful than any expensive gift he'd ever given or received. Papa Adrian. Luna appeared at his side, tugging on his shirt. Will you read us a story before bed? If your mama says it's okay. Just one story, Valentina said. Then it's bedtime. The children's bedroom was a cozy space filled with books, stuffed animals, and artwork taped to the walls. 2 small beds sat side by side, covered in quilts that looked handmade. It was the kind of room that spoke of love and attention rather than money and status. Luna chose the book, a worn copy of Where the Wild Things Are, and both children snuggled against Adrian on Luna's bed. The feeling of their warm little bodies pressed against his sides, their complete trust and acceptance, made Adrian's throat tight with emotion. He began to read, doing different voices for each character, and was rewarded with delighted giggles from both twins. When Max sailed away to Where the Wild Things Are, Luna gasped with excitement. When he tamed the wild things with his special trick, Marco asked how the trick worked. It's magic, Adrian explained. The magic of not being afraid. Are you afraid of anything? Luna asked. Yes, Adrian said honestly. I'm afraid of making mistakes that hurt people I love. Have you made mistakes like that? Marco asked with typical directness. Yes, big ones. But you're trying to fix them now? I'm trying very hard to fix them. That's good, Luna said sleepily. Mama says fixing mistakes is how people grow up. After the story, Adrian tucked both children into their beds, placing gentle kisses on their foreheads. The simple ritual felt both natural and miraculous. These were his children, his blood, his legacy in the truest sense. Papa Adrian? Luna's voice was drowsy but curious. Are you going away again? The question hit him like a physical blow. I'm going to my house to sleep, sweetheart. But I'll see you again very soon. Promise. I promise. Good. I like having a papa. Adrian sat in Valentina's living room after the children were asleep, surrounded by the comfortable chaos of family life. Toys were scattered across the floor, books lay open on the coffee table, and the walls were covered with children's artwork and family photographs. What struck him most was how happy everyone looked in those photos. Valentina and the twins at the beach, at parks, at birthday parties, all radiating the kind of joy that couldn't be faked or bought. "Thank you," he said when Valentina emerged from the children's room. "For tonight. For them. For giving me a chance I don't deserve." "You're right," Valentina said, settling into the chair across from him. "You don't deserve it. But they deserve a father who wants to know them. I want more than that, Valentina. I want to know you again too." "Do you?" "Because the woman I am now is very different from the one you dismissed 4 years ago. I can see that. You're stronger, more confident, more yourself, if that makes sense." It was terrifying at first, Valentina admitted. Being alone, being responsible for everything, but also liberating. "I learned I could trust my own judgment, my own instincts. I never should have made you doubt them." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the weight of shared history and uncertain future hanging between them. "They're incredible," Adrian said finally. "Luna's creativity, Marco's sensitivity. They're so smart, so alive, so full of love. You've done an amazing job raising them." "We've done an amazing job raising ourselves," Valentina corrected. "They taught me as much as I taught them. I've missed so much." "Yes, you have. First words, first steps, first days of school, bedtime stories, midnight fevers, scraped knees." Her voice carried just a hint of the old pain. "You missed it all." "I know. And I know I can never get that time back. But I'd like to be there for everything that comes next, if you'll let me." Valentina studied his face in the soft lamplight. "It won't be easy, Adrian. Children aren't business deals you can negotiate and close. They're complicated and demanding and completely illogical. They need consistency and patience and the ability to put their needs ahead of your own schedule. I'm ready for that. I want that. Are you?" Because in 6 months, when the novelty wears off and Marco has a tantrum in the grocery store and Luna refuses to go to bed and your phone is ringing with some urgent business crisis, will you still want it then? "Yes." "How can you be so sure?" Adrian was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was raw with honesty. "Because for 4 years, I've had everything I thought I wanted. Wealth, power, success, respect. And I've been utterly, completely miserable. The only times I felt anything real were when I was watching you from a distance, seeing you succeed, seeing you raise our children with such grace and strength. You became everything I should have been, and I realized that all my achievements meant nothing if I couldn't share them with the people I love." "Love." Valentina repeated the word carefully. "That's a complicated word, Adrian. It doesn't have to be. I love you, Valentina. I love Luna and Marco. I love the life you've built, the woman you've become, the family you've created without me. I want to be part of it, not to change it or control it, but to support it and cherish it and help it grow." The intensity in his voice made her shiver. This was dangerous territory, the place where her heart started overruling her head. As Adrian prepared to leave, Luna appeared in the hallway in her pajamas, rubbing sleepy eyes. "Papa Adrian? Are you going away again?" The simple question hit both adults like a physical blow. Adrian knelt down to her level, his voice gentle. "I'm going to my house to sleep, sweetheart. But I'll see you again very soon. Promise. I promise." "Good. I like having a papa." After Adrian left, Valentina sat in her studio, surrounded by the scents that had become her sanctuary. For the first time in months, she picked up the bottle containing her distant heart's fragrance, the scent that had captured her longing for the man Adrian could have been. Tonight, for the first time since she'd created it, the fragrance smelled different. Less like morning, more like possibility. Her phone buzzed with a text from Adrian. "Thank you for the most perfect evening of my life. Sweet dreams, beautiful." Despite every rational thought in her head, Valentina found herself smiling as she prepared for bed. But she also found herself wondering, could leopards really change their spots? Could a man who had built his entire identity around acquisition and control learn to love without conditions? Time would tell. And for the first time in 4 years, Valentina found herself hoping that time would be kind to all of them. 6 months later, Adrian Montclair sat on a blanket in Parco Sempione, watching his children play on the swings while Valentina unpacked their picnic lunch. It was an ordinary Sunday afternoon, The kind of mundane family moment he would have dismissed as unproductive just a year ago. Now, it felt like the most important meeting of his life. "Higher, Papa Adrian." Luna called from her swing. "I want to touch the clouds." "Be careful, Angel," Adrian called back, his heart clenching with the protective love that still surprised him with its intensity. Marco appeared at his side, holding a dandelion he'd picked from the grass. "Papa, why do some flowers grow in gardens and some flowers grow wherever they want?" "That's a very thoughtful question," Adrian said, lifting Marco onto his lap. "What do you think the answer is?" "I think the garden flowers are safe, but maybe lonely. And the wild flowers are free, but maybe scared sometimes. And which kind do you think is happier?" Marco considered this seriously. "I think they're both happy, just in different ways. Like how Mama was sad happy before you came back, and now she's just happy. Adrian looked across the blanket at Valentina, who was pretending not to listen to their conversation while slicing apples with surgical precision. The past 6 months had been a careful dance of building trust, establishing boundaries, and learning to be a family. It hadn't been easy. There had been moments when Adrian's phone rang during Luna's art class recital and he'd felt the old familiar pull of urgent business. There had been evenings when Marco had a fever and Adrian's instinct was to call a team of specialists rather than simply offer comfort and acetaminophen. There had been days when the beautiful chaos of family life felt overwhelming to a man who had spent 40 years controlling every variable in his environment. But there had also been moments of pure magic. The first time Luna had called him Papa without any prompting. The morning Marco had crawled into his lap while he was reading and fallen asleep against his chest. The evening when Valentina had laughed at one of his terrible jokes, and he'd seen a glimpse of the woman who had fallen in love with him all those years ago. "Adrian," Valentina said quietly, "we need to talk." The words sent a chill through him. In his experience, "we need to talk" was rarely followed by good news. "Luna, Marco," Valentina called, "come have some lunch." As the children settled on the blanket with their sandwiches and apple slices, Valentina folded her hands in her lap with the careful composure he recognized as her armor against difficult conversations. "I've been offered a partnership," she said without preamble. "A partnership?" "Guerlain wants to acquire Rossi Fragrances. Not just distribution, full acquisition. They're offering enough money to ensure the children's futures, fund my research and development indefinitely, and—" She paused. "And give me the freedom to focus on what matters most." Adrian felt the ground shift beneath him. And what matters most? Family. The twins. Building something real instead of just building something successful. "I see." Adrian's mind immediately shifted into business mode, analyzing implications and strategic options. What are the terms? What about creative control? What about Adrian? Valentina's voice cut through his rapid-fire questions. "I'm not asking for business advice. I'm telling you about a life decision." "Right. Of course." Adrian took a breath, recognizing the old patterns trying to reassert themselves. "What do you want to do?" "I want to sell. I want to take the money in the creative partnership and use both to build a different kind of life. A quieter life. A life where success is measured in bedtime stories and family dinners instead of quarterly reports and market share." "That sounds perfect," Adrian said, and realized he meant it completely. "Does it?" "Because I'm also telling you that I want to move. Out of Milan. Somewhere smaller. Somewhere the children can grow up knowing their neighbors and riding bicycles and having the kind of childhood that doesn't require security details and private schools." Adrian felt something cold settle in his chest. "How far out of Milan?" "Lake Como. There's a house. Nothing fancy. Just a house with a garden and space for the children to play and room for me to set up a small laboratory for special projects. Lake Como is 2 hours from the city." "Yes. 2 hours from my business, my responsibilities, your empire." Valentina's voice was steady, without accusation, simply stating a fact they both knew. Adrian looked at his children, happily eating their lunch and chattering about the ducks they'd seen by the pond, completely unaware that their future was being decided around them. "What are you asking of me, Valentina?" "I'm asking you to choose. Again. But this time, I'm asking you to choose with full knowledge of what each choice means." "Explain." "If you choose your business, your headquarters, your control over every deal and decision, then you can see the children on weekends. Scheduled visits, careful planning, the kind of managed relationship that fits around your professional obligations. And if I choose the family, then you come with us. You figure out how to run your business from Lake Como, or you delegate more, or you. Valentina paused, watching his face carefully. Or you step back entirely. If you think Adrian should choose love over money, family over empire, share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. The choice hung between them like a bridge spanning an impossible chasm. On one side lay everything Adrian had worked for, built, achieved, the empire that had defined his identity for 2 decades. On the other side lay everything he had discovered he actually wanted, the messy, unpredictable, uncontrollable joy of family life. You're asking me to give up everything I've built. I'm asking you to gain everything that matters. My businesses, my investments, the partnerships I've cultivated will survive without you micromanaging every decision. Or they won't, and you'll discover that your worth as a human being isn't tied to your net worth. Adrian stared at her, this woman who had somehow become both the love of his life and the most challenging adversary he'd ever faced. What if I can't? What if I'm too set in my ways, too addicted to control, too? Then you'll have learned something important about yourself. And we'll have learned something important about what kind of relationship is possible between us. And if I can, if I choose you, choose them, choose this life over that empire, then maybe we'll discover that the most valuable things in life can't be acquired, only earned through love. Luna looked up from her sandwich, sensing the tension between the adults. Mama, Papa Adrian, why do you look worried? We're not worried, Angel, Valentina said softly. We're just making some important decisions about our family. Good decisions or scary decisions? Marco asked with his typical directness. Important decisions, Adrian said. The kind that help people grow up. Like when you decided to come be our papa instead of staying at your work all the time? Exactly like that. Adrian looked around the park, at families playing together, children laughing, parents sharing the ordinary moments that made up the extraordinary experience of raising human beings. 6 months ago, he would have seen this scene as inefficient, unproductive, a waste of valuable time. Now he saw it as the entire point of being alive. There's something else, Valentina said quietly. Something I need you to understand before you decide. What? I'm not the same woman you fell in love with 4 years ago. I'm not the woman who needed your approval, your financial support, your permission to build a life. I've learned to love myself, to trust my own judgment, to create security without depending on anyone else. I can see that. Which means that if you choose us, if you choose this life, you're not getting a grateful woman who owes you everything. You're getting a partner who expects you to show up as an equal, emotionally, practically, completely. I understand. Do you? Because partnership means shared decisions, not executive orders. It means considering other people's needs before your own convenience. It means being present even when presence is boring or inconvenient or unprofitable. Adrian reached across the blanket and took her hand. The first time he'd touched her intentionally in 6 months. Her skin was warm, familiar, and yet somehow different, stronger, more certain. Valentina, do you remember what you said to me 4 years ago? When you walked out of my office? I said a lot of things. You said I would never know what I'd lost. But I do know. I've known every day for 4 years. I lost the chance to watch my children grow up. I lost the woman I loved most in the world. I lost the possibility of building something real instead of just building something profitable. Adrian, I'm not finished. You also said that some things can't be fixed, only rebuilt. Better than before. I want to rebuild, Valentina. I want to rebuild my life, my priorities, my understanding of what success actually means. And your business. We'll adapt or fail based on how strong the foundation really is. And if it fails, I'll build something new. Something that serves life instead of consuming it. Valentina stared at him, searching his face for signs of performance or manipulation. Instead, she saw something she'd never seen before in Adrian Montclair's eyes. Peace. You're serious. I'm serious. I choose you. I choose them. I choose the kind of life where people matter more than profit margins. Even if it means giving up control. Especially if it means giving up control. Because the thing I've learned in these past 6 months is that the most beautiful moments in life are the ones you can't schedule or optimize or manage into existence. Luna had finished her sandwich and was now picking dandelions, creating a small bouquet with the intense concentration that children brought to important projects. Papa Adrian, she said without looking up from her work, do you know what Mama's best perfume smells like? Which one is that, Angel? The one she wears when she's really, really happy. It smells like sunshine and new beginnings and—" Luna paused, searching for the right words. "Like when something sad turns into something beautiful. That sounds like a very special perfume." "It is. She only wears it on the most important days." Adrian looked at Valentina and noticed, for the first time, the subtle scent surrounding her, something warm and complex and hopeful. "Are you wearing it today?" he asked quietly. "I am." "Why?" "Because today feels like a new beginning." Marco, who had been listening to this conversation with 4-year-old seriousness, suddenly stood up and wrapped his arms around both Adrian and Valentina simultaneously. "I think we should all be a family now," he announced. "Like, a real family that lives in the same house and eats breakfast together and doesn't have to say goodbye all the time. What do you think, Luna?" Adrian asked. Luna looked up from her dandelion bouquet, her storm gray eyes, his eyes, bright with hope and certainty. "I think families are like perfumes," she said with the wisdom of a child who had grown up surrounded by fragrances and love. "They're made of lots of different scents, but when you put them together in the right way, they make something beautiful that couldn't exist without all the pieces." Adrian felt tears threaten for the 100th time in 6 months. These children, his children, had learned to speak in metaphors about love and beauty and the alchemy of human connection. "Then let's make something beautiful together," he said. 6 months later, Adrian stood in the garden of their house on Lake Como, watching Luna and Marco chase butterflies among the lavender plants that Valentina was cultivating for her new fragrance line. The house was modest by his former standards, for bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a kitchen that opened onto a garden that rolled down to the lake's edge. It was the most luxurious place he'd ever lived. Montclair Media still existed, run by a management team that had proven surprisingly capable of making decisions without his constant oversight. Adrian maintained creative control and strategic input, but his days were no longer consumed by the minute-by-minute management of an empire. Instead, his days were filled with school drop-offs and art projects and the gentle chaos of family life. He learned to make pancakes shaped like animals, to braid Luna's hair for special occasions, and to answer Marco's endless questions about how everything in the universe worked. He'd also learned that love wasn't something you scheduled or optimized or managed into existence. Love was something you showed up for, every day, in small moments and ordinary gestures. "Papa," Luna called from the garden. "Come see what we found." Adrian set down his laptop. He'd been reviewing quarterly reports, something that now took him an hour instead of consuming entire days, and walked into the garden. Luna and Marco had discovered a bird's nest in one of the olive trees, complete with 3 tiny eggs. "Look how small they are," Marco whispered with appropriate reverence. "Do you think the mama bird loves them even though they're not born yet?" "I think she loves them especially because they're not born yet," Adrian said. "Because loving someone before you even know who they'll become, that's the deepest kind of love there is." "Like how you loved us before you met us?" Luna asked. "Exactly like that." That evening, after the children were asleep, Adrian and Valentina sat on their small terrace overlooking the lake. The water reflected the last light of sunset, and the air carried the scent of jasmine from Valentina's experimental garden. "Do you ever miss it?" Valentina asked quietly. "The empire, the power, the feeling of controlling everything?" "Sometimes," Adrian admitted. "But then I remember what I was trying to control and why, and I realize I was building a prison instead of a kingdom. And now? Now I wake up every morning knowing that my life has meaning that can't be measured in profit margins or market share. I'm building something that will outlast any business deal. I'm helping to shape the people my children will become." "Any regrets?" Adrian considered this seriously. "Only one. I regret the 4 years I lost. The bedtime stories I didn't read, the scraped knees I didn't kiss, the moments of wonder I missed while I was chasing achievements that ultimately meant nothing. Those 4 years weren't lost," Valentina said softly. "They were necessary. You needed to build your empire to understand that empires without love are just elaborate tombs. I needed to learn to build my own strength to become a partner instead of a dependent. The children needed to learn they were loved unconditionally before they could safely trust that love to include you. So you think everything happened as it should. I think everything happened as it needed to. Pain has its own purpose, even when we can't see it at the time." Adrian reached for her hand, still amazed by the simple miracle of being allowed to touch her, to be part of her life, to share in the extraordinary ordinary moments that made up a family. "What does our future smell like?" he asked, remembering Luna's metaphor about families being like perfumes. Valentina smiled, the expression transforming her face with the kind of radiance that no amount of money could purchase. Like hope, she said. Like love that's been tested and proven strong. Like children's laughter and Sunday morning pancakes and the kind of contentment that comes from choosing what matters over what impresses. That sounds like the most beautiful fragrance in the world. It is, Valentina said, leaning against his shoulder as the last light faded over Lake Como. And the best part is, it gets more beautiful every day. From inside the house came the sound of Marco calling for water and Luna asking for one more story. The ordinary needs of children who felt safe enough to make demands, secure enough to express their wants without fear. Adrian and Valentina looked at each other and smiled. The smile of parents who had learned that the most successful life wasn't the one that impressed others, but the one that nurtured love. They went inside together, ready for the beautiful chaos of bedtime routines and whispered confidences and the gentle responsibility of raising human beings who would, hopefully, understand from the beginning that the most valuable things in life couldn't be purchased. Only earned. Only shared. Only loved into existence, one ordinary moment at a time. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of what truly matters, share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Because in a world that measures everything by money and status, sometimes we all need to remember that the richest life is the one filled with love. Like this video if you believe that it's never too late to choose love over ambition. Subscribe if you want more stories that remind us what success really means. And comment below, tell me about a time you had to choose between what looked impressive and what actually mattered. Because the most precious things in life can't be purchased, they can only be given through love, presence, and the courage to choose connection over conquest. Remember, success without family is just expensive loneliness. But love shared is the only empire worth building.